Now you see me. Now you don't. Is it real magic or mere illusion? And does it really matter? Well, I mean, in this case, it's obviously the magic of editing, but these issues and many others are addressed in Christopher Priest's novel, The Prestige. One of the British author's most acclaimed novels, The Prestige won, among other awards, the World Fantasy Award in 1996. But the book actually straddles the line between fantasy and science fiction, entering into the world of Victorian-era stage illusionists and showing us the dark side of both magic and science as these two rival magicians try to discover the secret behind the other's trick.
But what truly propelled this novel into popularity? Well, it was partly because of the Christopher Nolan film of the same name, starring Hugh Jackman, Christian Bale, Michael Caine, and Scarlett Johansson. Though not his most well-known or critically acclaimed film, The Prestige has all the mystery, darkness, and complex twists and turns you've come to expect from a Christopher Nolan film. But can it really stand up to the original story? Let's find out. This is Books vs. Movies. Number 3, do I really have to do this?
Yes, Twin, you do. It's part of the deal. Now just introduce the review.
This is the kind of thing nerds do.
Would you prefer to review the book?
No, God, no. Okay, fine. This is Books vs. Movies review of The Prestige. We have another 7-category review, just my luck, so let's start by looking at the first of our two main characters, the stage illusionist, Alfred Borden. One thing you'll find consistently in this review is that a lot of our comparisons really are like apples and oranges because the two versions are very different from each other. Borden, along with his contemporary Rupert Angier, both emerge as rival stage magicians, both with high acclaim in the magical world, and both with a very similar trick that appears to transport the magician to a remote location across the room instantly. They each perfect the trick throughout their careers, and neither one of them is quite able to figure out how the other accomplishes his trick until the very end. Since the story focuses on the rivalry and follows the stories of both men, both Borden and Angier act simultaneously as protagonist and antagonist, and we're meant to sympathize with both of them even when they're committing acts that most would find morally reprehensible.
Both of these characters record the story of their lives in a journal, which reveals some of their secrets, but not all, and throughout the story we get a feeling of secrecy from both men. The way the journals are written in the book reveals something about their personalities, as well as their philosophies on magic. Probably my favorite part of the novel is Borden's introduction to his journal, where he explains his philosophy on stage illusions. He says that there is a certain honesty between a stage illusionist and his audience. That the audience knows that what they are seeing on stage is not real. That there is a trick and a rational explanation for everything that's happening. But for the 2 hours that the show is taking place, they agree to allow themselves to be fooled, and the illusionist in turn tacitly agrees to fool them into thinking that what they are seeing on stage is real magic. Now, Borden recognizes that others might read his journal, and as such, he begins by showing us that there is nothing up his sleeve, as it were, and that he has no reason to trick us. But, at the same time, he acknowledges that he is, in fact, an illusionist, and that there is probably more to this story than he is telling us. That we are being tricked, and what's more, we know it, and accept it.
Borden from the movie isn't quite as philosophical, thank God, but he has other themes associated with him. Borden in the movie kind of represents the working class stage illusionist who isn't afraid to get his hands dirty. It's clear that he's the better magician than Angier, but he doesn't always know how to sell it. He works very hard to maintain the integrity of his tricks, but he doesn't have the stage presence that Angier has to really pull off his tricks in a way that truly wows his audience. Also, his journal is present in the movie as well, but as a red herring, and written with the full knowledge that Angier would find it, decipher it, and read it. So Borden is playing on Angier's obsession to learn the secret of his magic trick, which definitely makes him the more clever side of the rivalry.
May you find solace for your thwarted ambition back in your American home.
But the book plays out this difference between them by clearly outlining the philosophies of the two men. Borden is a believer in the integrity of the pact, and believes that stage illusionry should not be about astounding the audience with what must be real magic, but instead giving them the chance to suspend the disbelief and allow themselves to be fooled, which is actually a nice commentary on storytelling in general. Also, the journal takes us to the very beginning of Borden's interest in magic, and we actually watch him do all the hard work necessary to climb the rungs and become a truly great stage illusionist.
And of course, we can't ignore the dual nature of his personality, which I would be evil enough to reveal to you, but I'm contractually obligated not to. In the interest of avoiding all-out spoilers until the very end, we won't talk about it until the final round. For now, though, we'll just say that the movie portrays this dual personality very well, mostly with Borden's wife talking about how some days he means it when he says he loves her, and some days he doesn't.
The way this is portrayed in the book is through the journal, and I think I like this way better, simply because it's just as subtle, but it actually permeates the entirety of his character. Borden, at certain points during the story, will converse with himself, and sometimes argue with himself. So the two sides of the duality are a little more clearly defined. Also, Borden in the book is simply more likable. We gravitate more toward his character simply because of how honest and open he appears at the beginning. Borden in the movie is a lot rougher and angrier, especially in comparison to Angier. He seems like more of an antagonist, especially at the beginning, and while we do gravitate more toward his character towards the end of the movie, it takes us the entire movie to get there, whereas Borden from the book earns our trust from the very beginning. So for those reasons, I think that Borden in the book is the better character.
Seriously, just the first round. Well, now let's look at the other side of this rivalry. The Great Danton, or Rupert Angier. Angier is Borden's opposite in many ways. Where Borden from the movie had more of an understanding and talent for stage illusions, Angier is the showman. He's a man of privilege and breeding who knows how to present himself and has a habit of stealing some of Borden's tricks and performing improved versions of them.
Angier of the book is similar as far as his breeding and privilege go, but he's not so much a showman, or at least that's not the part of him that's emphasized. What is emphasized is his desire to know the secrets of the trade. This is where Angier believes that the true nature of magic lies. He's much more of an advocate of real magic, that is, the tricks to which there are no tricks. He begins his career as what's called a mentalist and appears to read people's minds through a combination of visual cues and a highly trained memory. He continues his career by performing seances and actually tricking people into believing that he can communicate with the dead in order to bring comfort to grieving families. And when he does try to copy Borden's transported man trick, he attempts to do so by finding a machine that can actually transport someone from one place to another and not just appear to do so. So where Borden put more faith in the pact, Angier puts more faith in the prestige.
But if Borden is more likable in the book, Angier is considerably less so. He's just not somebody we can relate to very well. He's a man of means, fastidiously organized, and, for lack of a better word, prissy. Like I said, both Borden and Angier act as protagonist and antagonist simultaneously, but in the movie we gravitate toward Angier's character initially because he just seems nicer. Plus, though his colleagues disdain his squeamishness about getting his hands dirty for the sake of the act, the audience, most of us anyway, see him as a man of morals. Also, his initial actions against Borden are largely due to the loss of his wife. Again, something we can sympathize with.
Angier doesn't lose his wife in the book, but he does lose an unborn child due to Borden's actions. And he doesn't react quite as dramatically, at least not at first. Also, Angier regrets his actions in the book most of the time, and in the end, even though he wants to finally kill Borden, he can't do it. Because despite the animosity between the two men, on some level he still respects Borden's magical abilities, and he feels sorry for the life that he's had to lead. But the dynamic change that Angier makes in the movie is what really decides it for me. We see him become more and more obsessed with making his trick better than Borden's, and by the end of the movie, he really will do whatever it takes. But by this time, his motivation is not so much to pull off a convincing stage illusion as it is to just beat Borden. And not even for the sake of learning his secret, just for the sake of beating him.
You always were the better magician. We both know that. But whatever your secret was, you have to agree, mine is better.
I can relate. So Angier basically started out as the closest thing we have in this story to a protagonist, and ended up as an antagonist, cold and callous with virtually no humanity left in him. And yet for all that, we still gravitate toward his character because we know that his motivation throughout the story was his wife and the fact that Borden was allowed the happy life that he was denied. In the book, Antier's motivation is just all over the place. Sometimes he regrets the feud and is ready to end it, but then other times he suddenly wants to kill Borden. And we have trouble connecting with his obsession because it's not born out of passion, but out of envy, pettiness, and greed. In the movie, even though most of us hate the things that he's done, we still pity him because we remember the man that he once was. And that, for me anyway, makes him the better character.